Bal.
Dank je, champ. Wil je deze even voor mij aangeven?
Gewoon nog met ons op, dacht ik.
Nee.
Sy vlekkie like dit mos.
Ja, dankie, champ. Ja, maar dat is sterk. Ja.
Misschien was het het dan. Omdat je het weer recht maakt. Zonder om jou te vertellen.
Op boeking.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first TLHE 8411 session. Sorry. Um, I was speaking about 8412 from the beginning of the year, so from first semester, we chatted about how 8412 will follow on from 8411 and address aspects of assessments. But before we start, just to check in, how is everybody doing? On my side, it was such a beautiful, sunny day today. I was so mistaken. I thought it's going to be one of those wonderful days, and then you step out and get hit with ice. It's so cold. But other than that, very good. And on your side, how is everything? I'm not sure if anyone's typing. It look like it is. I should have started with the very first question. Can you all hear me? Hit a thumbs up if you can hear me. No sound. Can you see me? What's going on?
I can hear and see you from my side. I could hear and see you from my side, Doc. Thanks.
Okay, not sure about everybody else. I'm not getting any thumbs up, so any responses. So I don't know if you can hear or see me. I did hear someone unmute and say that they could hear and see. But
Yes,
can I
I
just
can
find
hear
out
you,
from
Doc.
everybody else if you can hear me? Sorry, if you can hear me, can you please give me a thumbs up? Then I can check. Oof, nothing happening. I wonder what's going on. Because I can see everybody. Doesn't seem like anyone can see my chat. You see my slide.
I don't have a chat thing on my side, Doc, so I can't respond. My team seem to not have that chat thing.
I'm just gonna log out and log back in and see what happens. I'm not sure why this is the case. Let me Let's unmute. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? I was in there speaking away. There we go. Hello. Okay, great. I was here for like a while speaking, and I think only one person could actually hear me. I even shared my camera, and nobody could see me. And I was even posting messages in the chat, and I don't think anyone could even see my chat. I think now at least you can see and hear me. Oh, you could hear me and see me, but I wasn't getting anything from you, nothing. No reactions, not even anything in the chat box when I asked how you doing. So let's try again. How is everybody doing? Let's get something. If you don't have, sign in using the VC account. Oh, there we go. Cabello, can I ask for clarity? We have iSTAS on both the modules. Is that announcement for both or only this one? It's for both. You can check your module outline. And last week I explained the assessment structure in the lecture. So, yeah. Oh, there we go. Everybody did respond. Why wasn't I getting these responses? Okay, Kavi, no complaints for once. No, you don't ever complain. Cabello says all good. Ice, rain, and very cold in here. You know, Diana, I still think when it's raining and cold, then it's still okay. But it's when you know when it's beautiful and sunny and everything looks so nice outside, but then it's so freezing cold, then I don't like that deception. Boisamelo is in Japan. It's so hot, wonderful. I've just had friends come back from the school holidays and they were in Japan, and I was looking at their pictures. My goodness, you are like surrounded by such beauty. Sunette, good busy week. Peter Rock had me nervous for a day, but now it's more relaxed. Look, it had us all nervous for a day. I was literally, if I can tell you, at that point, I was working on that KERS package that I was telling you about that I wanted to prepare for you, to help you with, to get you, help you unpack the concepts and prepare you better for the first assignment. So I was busy working on that package. And right before my eyes, suddenly the module disappeared. Then I'm like, what happened here? Did my internet go wonky? Like, what's going on? Then I tried again. And then I went to look at TLHE and it was gone. And then I've got admin rights, obviously, so I can access any module for the online campus. And I went and I checked and I couldn't find any modules. And I'm like, what on earth is going on here? And then my biggest fear was that I had done all this work in both modules on ARC. So, I mean, I pre-populated, everything is ready. I mean, we were up and running from even before lectures officially commenced because, like, from my own experience, I know I like to start well in advance. So I said for those students who want to get started, let me get things up and running. And I thought to myself, if the modules disappeared, I wonder if all that content and material and all that work that I put in, if all that's going to disappear. So I nearly lost my mind, but very relieved everything came back. Peter, I'm sure you're also quite relieved. And then just regarding the ICE submission that was due on the 22nd, it's fine. You can submit it now when you have access. Okay, Cabello, I've answered your question regarding that. We could hear and see you. If you don't have the chat option, yeah. I was halfway through setting rubrics. Oh my goodness. The nice thing, Kavi, about ARC is when you are developing the rubrics on ARC, they auto save. I don't know if you remember with Learn, if you didn't keep saving them at regular intervals and then you go back in, something happens. I know once I accidentally closed it and it was an assessment, I think, that had like, I don't know how many rubrics, and it was gone. I had to start all over again. I nearly cried. So no, oh dear. Well, mine always auto save on my side, but yeah, maybe you must just keep remembering to save them because that's no fun at all. To create rubrics, it's just really not a task I enjoy either. I've got 2 more to do for TLHE. But okay, let's get on with what I wanted to get through this evening. So basically, just regarding ARC, I took you on a walkthrough of the CURS module, and TLHE is set up exactly the same. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen so that let me first get into ARC. Just for those who didn't see last week, but I'm sure by now you found everything. And it's quite, I don't know, I don't want to assume, but I think it's organized quite well. Thumbs up if you agree. Were you able to find everything? Thumbs down if you're still lost. Yeah, no, yeah, okay. I try to make it as logical and as simplified as possible. So, just creating a few folders with everything in it. But let me just show you very quickly, for those who weren't here. Just connecting, I'll be a minute. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so this is the TLHE8412 module, as you will see it, and the same as CURS. If you go to communication and announcements, very important, please check because I do send post announcements, some important information now and then is there. Also, if you look on your homepage, there's something called posts, and I also post some things there. And then if you scroll down, you'll find your calendar. I've populated your calendar for you as much as possible. And then under content, this is where you'll find most of the stuff that you need, all of the stuff that you need. So let's see. It begins with important documents, and under important documents, how to get your PAS. Thank you to Danielle for sharing that with us last week. But we'll just keep an eye because obviously we're waiting for the summative dates. And then your module outline, your POE, the pacer that I created for you, and then your group allocations. And then if you look, there's your ICE tasks. There they are, the 4 of them. As I said, they're not for marks, but successful completion of assignments is closely linked to the tasks that I provided here. So as I explained last semester, the way the ICE tasks are designed, first of all, it gets you comfortable in working with your group and understanding the dynamic and, checking for each other's strengths and so on. But that's one aspect. The main aspect is it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your understanding of the concepts, unpacking the concepts, engaging with them. And then, of course, in the assignment, it takes it a step further to see your application of the concepts. And also, if you don't do any of them, then it's going to be difficult for me to determine where the group is at and where you need extra support. So when I look at the ICE tasks, then I immediately know, okay, we need to do a little bit more on whatever the case might be. So yeah, it's important. Please do them. Then in terms of lecture recordings, my YouTube link will be here. Obviously, after tonight's session, I will upload the recording and then add the link here. And then additional recordings, you've got the welcome and introduction, and then the assessment support recordings, and learning unit 1 recording should be visible. Hey, there you go. There's a recording for Learning Unit 1. The others will follow. And then, of course, is your referencing support material, okay, to help you make sure that you're referencing and doing all of that correctly. So that's where to find everything and so on. Like I said, it's quite, all there. It shouldn't be too difficult for you to find things. But if you are looking for something and you cannot find it, oh dear, I'm uploading the wrong one. Then please just let me know and then I can help you. Okay, sorry, just pulled the wrong slide. It jumped. Let me get the right one. And then we can begin. Yeah. Oh, just in terms of communication, please, when you email, just to send me an email saying something like, my group members are not communicating with me, for example. And if you send it from your personal email, then I'm not going to be able to help you immediately. I will have to send back to ask for your student number, which module, and so on. So rather just maybe use this as a template, then I have all the information that I need, and then it's not about now trying to find out who you are and where you belong and what the module is, then I can get straight to your query. So maybe just use this as a template in the body of your email. I don't really mind if you don't say, hi, I trust you are well, or I hope you are having a good evening. I don't mind if you want to. I love all that. It's very nice. It's warm. But look, I understand when you're working, you want to get your question out there. I don't mind if you just follow this template. Yeah, it's quite fine. Okay, so Learning Unit 1 of TLHE is contextualizing quality assessment in higher education. So very important is to understand what assessment is in terms of education. So if you had to Google assessment and evaluation, and you try and use dictionary definitions, you're going to fall short because they mean different things in, of course, the education context. Assessment is to increase quality, evaluation is to judge quality. Very often people use the terms assessment and evaluation interchangeably, but they actually are not the same thing. Yeah, so we are going to be looking at quality assessment in higher education in Learning Unit 1. So I always say we cannot speak about assessment and not discuss the fish climbing the tree assessment cartoon. How many of you have seen this cartoon before? Anybody here who teaches assessment modules in like B.Ed or a postgrad education module? Have you seen this cartoon before? Okay, Peter, do you want to unmute and speak, or are you just raising your hand? Okay, okay, raising your hand to say you've seen it before. Yeah, and okay, so let's just unpack it a little bit. So what we have here is a picture with some different animals, and we have someone sitting at a table on a chair, and the person is saying, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So if you look at this cartoon, what does it tell you about how assessment is conducted in South Africa? So if you can type your responses in the chat, please. What does this cartoon tell you about assessments in South Africa? Anything, or not even what it tells you about assessment in South Africa. What does this cartoon tell you? What does it mean to you? What do you understand? What message is it trying to convey, in other words? So take 5 minutes to respond. It's now 52 minutes past. So I don't even think you need 5 minutes. It's just whatever you are thinking when you're looking at it. There's no right or wrong answer. Great. Some really good responses coming through. Very apt. People with different skills and abilities are given the same test, standardized testing. Conveying that the same expectations are playing on. Absolutely. So if you just simply think about the matric exams, that in itself will tell you what assessment is currently like in the South African context. All learners have to sit down and write this one same examination, and yet we know that all learners have different learning styles and learning paces, and are not all at the same level or have the same skill set. But yet everyone is assessed the same and expected to perform the same, but yet the assessment is not fair. So if we look at this assessment of climbing the tree, you can see the monkey is definitely smiling, it's very happy. The dog looks a bit unhappy there. The fish looks like it's going to swallow its own self. The elephant is quite concerned. Yeah, the bird is like can't be bothered. So yeah, not everybody is going to be able to do this assessment, yet for them to pass, it's what they need to do. And that is the reality of how assessments are conducted, not just at school level, but also in higher education. For example, if we set a paper, and I've seen this in semester one in those lesson plans that you were developing, and the part where you had to say how students will be assessed, it was almost always like students will be given an assignment, they will have to write an essay, they will have to complete a case study, but yet there needs to be that variety to cater for all different learning styles and needs. So it should be something like maybe write an essay or create a PowerPoint presentation with voiceover, something like that. But then immediately when we do that, we're like, wait, hold on. But then they're not all doing the same thing. So how is it a fair assessment? But yet on the other side of it, how is it a fair assessment to expect students to do something that they just simply cannot do? So this image basically speaks to the principles of assessment. And I'm sure as you were reading to prepare for today's session, you would have come across the principles of assessment. But we're going to get more into that a bit later. So here's the second cartoon that, sorry, I'm sniffing quite a bit. For some reason, my sinuses are just going insane. I think it's getting like really, really cold now. But yeah, this cartoon is also one that I cannot ever speak about assessment and not refer to it. So have a look at this one. What does this cartoon tell you about how assessments are conducted? So you have a square peg, round hole. I think this is about 2 minutes, and you can post your responses in the chat box. Sunette, the question is on the slide. What does this cartoon tell you about how assessments are conducted? No problem. Okay, maybe more responses are still coming, but I think Kavi's response about sums it up really well. It's like, one size fits all. And if it doesn't, they're going to try and squash it in and make it fit, and you just got to do the best that you can. I just find this image so freaky, that cut open head, like it's just so weird. But yeah, anyway, you get the point. Tando says students just need to learn how to take a test and to not necessarily understand the concepts. Yes, cram, pass, and forget. So I think that's such a relevant point, and it's not meaningful learning taking place because the focus is on passing the test. So it's about committing things to your short-term memory. And I always say to students, it's like, when I studied law for a good number of years, don't ask me why. But then we would go in to write the test, and then as soon as you come out, by the next day, you've forgotten everything. And for any module, I think where you have to do that type of cramming in order to pass, you will forget. I really like that CPF. It is really just because you are committing things to your short-term memory because you just need to pass. The perception that one kind of assessment will fit everyone, and then assessments, batteries are built in a certain way, which doesn't necessarily align with how students have been taught, prepared as such. The issues of validity, fairness, and the other principles of assessment, yes. Standardized testing forces students into the same mold and does not accommodate diverse ways of thinking. Absolutely. And to an extent, it's most assessments. It's just how they are conducted nowadays. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. We teach in a certain way. We're all about constructivism and aligning our teaching with Gen Z and catering to diverse needs and understanding our students' needs and so on. But then when we come to the assessment, then it's okay, go sit down and write a test and an exam, we don't actually factor in that not all students can sit down and write a test or an exam. I mean, if I think about like back when we were in school, you had those one or two, like, one or two in a whole grade of learners who couldn't sit still, couldn't pay attention, were easily distracted. Now it's become so common to have learners with ADD, ADHD, those on the autism spectrum, in your lecture room, and now yet you're asking them to go sit down and try and write a 3-hour exam. Like, how fair is that? It's absolutely ridiculous because it doesn't need to happen. And then the other thing that totally baffles me about these sit-down exams is you sit down to write an exam and you've got to, as much as they say it's application, you have to first understand, and sometimes you have to memorize something in order to be able to apply it. So like a process that has 7 steps. You have to remember the 7 steps. If you don't remember the 7 steps, how are you going to apply them? And how are you going to remember the 7 steps in the first place? Yes, you must understand them and so on. But it is about committing it to the memory, right? But yet, in the real world, if you want to know the 7 steps, what do you have to do? You just have to go to Google. The answer is there. So, what is the actual purpose? I don't know. It's testing knowledge. That's what it boils down to. So if we look at modern assessment measures and we look at the olden days, what does this image tell you about modern assessment measures? And I think I started touching on it in the first slide, and I think I made my stance clear. But what about you? What does this image tell you about modern assessment measures? And do you agree? Do you think this is how students should be assessed? Why not? So what does the image tell you about modern assessment measures? Do you agree with the modern assessment measures? Why not? Take about 5 minutes, I think, to think about it a little bit. Although I'm sure most of you already by now will have an idea or a stance. I mean, if you only just look at that grade 12 exam. Okay. Hey, some really interesting ideas coming through. I've unmuted even ahead of time. I like what Peter is saying about the promotion of self-esteem compared to the traditional, which would almost break you down. And you can see that in this image. Like, I don't know how many of you had these overachiever parents, and you get 92% for an assignment, and you come home and you're like, "Yay, I got 92%." And they're like, "What happened to the other 8%?" We all had those. I always make a joke and I tell people I have 5 A's in my name because my parents wanted to see 5 A's on my report card every year. I mean, like, really, what were they thinking? Like dartboarding A's there. So yeah, it was the culture that we grew up in. Even in the school, the teachers would say things like that, and they weren't afraid to say, like, call children names for failing and so on. Like, failing was not accepted. It was seen as, something terrible. Tomorrow, old ways is verbatim, nothing really absorbed. Absolutely. Nowadays, it has to be at a pace that is beneficial for lifelong, meaningful learning. Absolutely. Dustin, modern assessments to test beyond just traditional exams. Yes. Cabello, I think what was really interesting about your response was the yes and yes, and it challenges the norms and allows for dynamic change and transformation as well. And we can't stay static anymore. We can't keep testing in the old ways. And who can tell me why? What is the biggest reason that we can no longer test and assess in the same ways? While you're thinking about that, Casey Lee has said modern assessments are shifting from how much did you memorize to a more holistic approach. Yes, absolutely. So nurturing students who are not just takers, but future contributors to society and the communities that they operate in. Kavi, I feel modern assessments align more with self-development and community building themes instead of individual skills that only the individual would benefit from. And the internet, high school students are so brainwashed to believe that only high marks equal an achievement. Absolutely. When they get to tertiary, they are horrified when they fail to get absolutely. It is such a shock to the system. Like at school, you're getting distinctions, and then you come to tertiary, and suddenly you're getting 50%, and you can't understand why. And it's because at school, you rote learning, whereas at tertiary, now you are expected to apply. And then you don't have that critical analytical thinking skills, and therefore now you're not performing as you should. So I asked the question, why can we no longer have those old assessments? Absolutely. The work environment is so different. Um, Nobody cares anymore. Like in the past, if you went for a job interview, you would get asked questions, content knowledge questions about the job. Like if you went to an advertising company, they'd ask you, so what do you know about the ADA principle of advertising? How would you apply the D in ADA to advertising, whatever, and nowadays it's about the skill, not the knowledge. Student populations are more homogeneous. Yes, absolutely. We're so diverse. But also think about AI and the smear it has made on absolutely everything. We think, and I know this is qualification is tertiary education, but yeah, obviously, your students are going to start off in school and then get to you. Schools are completely plagued with the unethical use of AI. I was doing some teaching experience supervision at some schools last year and chatting to the student teachers and the teachers. I was so surprised. I thought that it was a higher education problem, but even at school level, student learners are just using AI to complete their assignments. And as we know, that's happening at tertiary as well. So my point is, why ask students to write 3 essays when ChatGPT writes the most beautiful essays? You can't give them those type of tasks anymore because it's the nature of the student. They can get help to do the work, then that's what they're going to do. Like, why would you want to write an entire essay from start to end when ChatGPT is going to do it for you? So what are your thoughts on that? How do you think you can, in your discipline, shift assessment so that it's a little bit more aligned with the current context that we find ourselves in? And when I say current context, I'm not only speaking about the AI, unethical AI plague, but I'm also talking about the type of student. I'm talking about the type of learning environment, the type of teaching and learning strategies that we implement. So if you consider all of that, how do you think that you can re-engineer assessments in your discipline? What do they currently look like? And yeah, like, how do you think you can make that shift? That is, I don't want an answer for that right now. That is the question that's going to be on your mind throughout the semester. That is ultimately where we are heading. So in the final task of your POE, you will be required to develop an assessment. And it has to factor in all these things that we are thinking about and talking about. And then you're going to obviously take that into account and design all these wonderful assessments. And I look forward to seeing them because it's just so interesting to be here right now at this time where all of this is happening and to see all these changes happening and all these ideas coming out. It's a challenge. We really, really are in a very challenging time. So keep this in mind in everything that you are doing in this module, is that how are you going to shift assessments in your faculty so that they are better aligned and suited for the current context that we are operating in. Okay, so here's some two interesting questions. How were you assessed in college or university? So when you were doing, let's say, your undergrad qualification, how were you assessed? What were your experiences of being assessed in this way? Think about if you could change assessment in higher education, what would you change and how would you change it and why? So that's the question that you're going to be thinking about as we go along. But for now, how were you assessed in college or university? And what were your experiences of being assessed in this way? So I'll give you, time is just going so fast. 4 minutes, please. The word assessment we talk about here is synonymous with assessment battery. Cabello, can you elaborate? I'm not sure what you mean by assessment battery. While we're waiting for Cabello to elaborate, I'll also just check quickly. Maybe it's a term that I'm not too familiar with. I will just check on my side. But in the meantime, can you please post responses to the two questions on the slide? Thank you. Okay, so I've had a look and I see what you're talking about. Yes, I do think it is something specific, and I'll be interested to see in the first ICE task when you are unpacking. When you ask that question, this is immediately what I thought about. When you are unpacking the concept of assessment, and that's what the first ICE task is designed to do, I'm going to be very interested to see how you're going to apply it in terms of your discipline. So when we're speaking about assessments in this module, obviously, we're speaking about those types of, let me just try and put it simply without actually defining it for you, because I want you to come up
with your definitions and your understandings based on how things take place in your faculty. But it's basically those different types of methods that are used to check if the learning outcomes of the particular module have been met. Okay, and that's going into almost the purpose of assessment, but that's basically what it is. So when you speak about, I think, a battery of assessments, from what I can see in the definition that I pulled up, it's a collection of all those different assessment tasks. But let's see what you come up with there. Tamara says, Think VC has made it quite interesting. A mix of project groups and individual, not sitting for standardized tests, application, and thinking outside the box concepts. Indeed, but I still, and maybe I'm just a bit critical sometimes, but even when I'm doing this module and even as I'm speaking to you, my mind is immediately going to how could TLHE POE be redesigned so that it's, catering to more students' needs and abilities? Like, how is it still limited? Is it indeed catering to everybody? Most definitely the group projects and the POE structure and the application and the designing and the developing and then doing Venn diagrams and tables or bullet points or how you prefer to structure your responses. But is that actually enough, or does it need to now still go another step? And of course, it will depend on your discipline. That's an excellent point. Thank you for that. Kavi, multiple choice questions, essays, teaching practice, long, boring, and not stimulating. In hindsight, all ended up being useless or irrelevant because by the time I started working, I knew everything except how to do my job. That is so interesting because when I think I did my undergrad, that's what it was like. It was those boring essays, writing assignments, and in those days we used to write, not type, um, giving my age away. And then you'd have to go and sit down in those big venues where like 500 students were writing at the same time, and you'd get that number, all very daunting. Your tummy would be in knots, all those processes, and don't dare forget your student card. Yeah, there we go. Oh, Peter is saying exactly the same thing. Massive halls with 300 students writing those multiple mini essays. Sometimes there was that multiple choice. UNISA likes to give those. On that multiple choice answer sheet, gosh, I always messed up that answer sheet. It was a nightmare. Yeah, spotting. Like everybody would get together a week before, like, which essay are you studying? Which one are you doing? Like, trying to see what we can do. In my final year, none of the students wanted to help each other before assessments with honors spot so competitive. Sure, that's terrible. Because all that collaboration and that wonderful spirit that you build and friendships and relationships that you build now all just go up into nothing because everybody wants to get into the next qualification, which is highly competitive. Written-based testing with few practicals in the lab. Even those lab testings, I'm sure it's very, lots of anxiety. Terrible, terrible. And the worst thing was whenever I sat down to write, I don't know if that happened, my tummy always growled and loudly. I don't know why. I just got very hungry. We had to sit down, assessment tests in huge venues, all mixed up, students from all qualifications. It was application of our knowledge to the given scenario. Okay, interesting case study. Written essays, more around theory, role play, videos for reflection, and then a practicum. Okay, great. So in undergrad, that was also my experience, kind of like how Peter and everyone above have explained. And then in PGCE, it's so interesting because the person who was in charge of that qualification, she was old. She was this old lady, and she was just the most amazing, wonderful teacher. And she was so creative and so progressive for the time. It was unbelievable. It was the year of OBE, outcomes-based education. And that's when I did my PGCE, and everybody was so confused and not knowing what to do. And when we'd go to the schools to do our teaching experience, the teachers all would want to come and learn from us, like, what is OBE, you know? But what was really interesting was how everything was approached. There was no such thing really as sitting down for an exam, you know. Okay, we wrote 2 exams, I think, in the entire PGCE, but we did amazing things. We did portfolios. We did posters. In those days, you know, those slides, you had to make those slides and you put it in that clicker machine, a slide machine, I call it a clicker machine. Do you know that one I'm talking about? We had to make slides. We had to make OHPs, you know, overhead projector transparencies. Like, yeah, we had to do that. We had to keep reflective journals. The learning was amazing, absolutely amazing. Honestly, I think if I go back and I speak about meaningful learning and assessment for learning, that was it. That was 100% it. And for the time that it was happening, it was like so progressive. And that is like, I think, what I would like to see. And we used to do, like, we were put into little groups, and then we had to do little teaching projects in our little groups and the rest of the group. So they say, okay, this week you have to do a discussion. So engage your group in a discussion. It could be on any topic. It didn't have to be on what you were going to teach. And then the group would then, give you feedback on your ability to discuss given like certain criteria. And then the same for explaining, demonstrating, like that. And it was so practical. It was just absolutely amazing. So I think definitely that is what we should be leaning more toward. And you need to think about now in your faculty, how can you now make that shift and make it meaningful? Um, we are like moving quite out of time. Where are we at? Yeah. Okay, so purpose of assessment. Why do you think students are sometimes fearful of being assessed in tests and exams? And why do they fear failing assessments? So I think this is like relatively obvious. In higher education, first of all, it's so expensive. So every time you fail a module, you're going to have to pay money to repeat it. It's terrible. Also, the longer that you take to complete your qualification, then you're reducing the amount of time that you have to earn. And of course, if you're living with parents, then you want to get out of there. But I think like there's many reasons why students are fearful, and it might also be parental and home pressure. You know, you like the first one in your family to come to tertiary, and now you fail, and it's such a disgrace. Oh, failing was like such a big embarrassment. But perhaps if assessment focused on what students do know instead of what they don't know, they'll be less fearful. And the thing that I like to say about assessments, like for example, the TLHE 8411 POE, and if you look at the TLHE 8412 POE, they are both, I'm hoping, designed in such a way that they allow you as the student to showcase what you know rather than to look for what you don't know. I think that is what an assessment should be. It should be designed in such a way that it gives the student the opportunity to put their best foot forward, so to speak, you know, to show, look at all that I have learned and look at all that I can do. But instead, when markers mark, they're not looking for that. They're looking for, let me sharpen my red pen and see where can I take marks away from? What can I mark wrong? What is wrong with the submission rather than what is right with the submission? So I think once that shift happens and, you know, once your student starts understanding that your focus isn't necessarily on what they don't know, but rather on how much they have developed, then they become less fearful of assessment. So this is a very important one. And basically, when you are doing any of your parts of your POE for this module, you must factor in and take into account the underlying principles of assessment. I think somebody, Kabelo, was it you who touched on it earlier on validity, reliability, flexibility, and fairness. Those are your principles of assessment. Understand them well. Please go through them thoroughly. It is something that you spend the next 2 days on. Let it be understanding those principles and applying them to your faculty or discipline. In what ways can these principles impact on assessment practice in higher education? And there again, the answer is basically the principles of assessment, if not applied, then compromises the assessment. Like just recently at my children's school, I went to view their mid-year assessments, and I was looking at the math, and I saw that they both like got one part of the math like not well. It was, I think, categorizing shapes, 3D shapes and normal shapes or something like that. And then I looked at the question and I said to the teacher, like, this doesn't, like, what happened here? And the teacher said, no, but the question was phrased really poorly. A lot of learners, didn't understand what to do here. And so this question wasn't done very well. But lo and behold, when the report comes, the mark is there, that pathetic mark is there. And then I'm like, but that wasn't a valid question. How can it be included? That is not fair. If the learners didn't understand what to do because the instruction was poor, then how can you use that assessment? Does that make sense? So that is how the principles of assessment are applied. So when designing assessments, you need to minimize the contradictory effects of assessment purposes and underlying principles. Okay. Where to now? Complete Learning Unit 1. We are just a little bit past time, guys. Just bear with me, please, for 4 more minutes. Complete and submit ICE 1, please, and then start working on part 1 of your POE. And this is what part 1 looks like. The recording is there. It's uploaded. It is a group submission, and make sure you submit as per the date that I gave you on your schedule, not the PAS. The date is not in the PAS. It's on the schedule that I gave to you. So in your group, what you need to do, you must investigate, evaluate, and expound guidance and feedback as a possible approach to preparing students for assessment. So basically what Bloxham and Boyd are saying is that students are not adequately prepared for assessments, not in the sense that they aren't taught the content, but they aren't prepared for the expectations of the assessment. So how can you use guidance and feedback to prepare students for assessment in your discipline? And then there's a table that's given for you to populate, which will help you unpack your ideas in a nice, summarized, readable way. Okay, but the recording is there, and on your schedule, I have provided a date for when we will have the Q&A session. In fact, I think it's in our next lecture, which is not next week, the following week. But you can just double check that and then bring your questions about that part of your POE to that lecture. We'll have, as usual, the 15 minutes at the end of the lecture. Okay, so I'm sorry we ran into a little bit of overtime, and thank you very much for your engagement. And I hope that this very first lecture was, if nothing else, inspiring and making you want to go, because it certainly always does this for me, where I now sit and think about my own assessment design and how I can, shift it even more. So to inspire you to want to now go and critically evaluate and think about how you can make those shifts in your assessment so that they are more fit for purpose for our current context. Okay, so thank you very much and have a lovely evening. And then I will see you next week, Wednesday at the same time for COURS. Good night, everybody. Bye.